going to have dinner with Tibbs and the crew tonight here when they make their trip up here to Indy.
After the job you did last year, I hope they're picking up the check tonight.
No, it's on me tonight. I got
you.
Welcome to the Putback on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley here with Chris Williamson, who starts us off with the baseline.
Yeah, Ian, last week, RJ Barrett was acknowledging that he had once again gotten off to a slow start this season.
I don't know why. It's third year in a row I started like this. I don't know.
You know, Ian, Canada's greatest export since Celine Dion flipped the narrative on Saturday in New Orleans. He had a career-high 35 points and tied a career-high with 6 made threes as the Knicks beat the Zionless Pelicans 123-117. And although he was critical of his defensive performance, we know he's been strong in that regard so far this season. So how is RJ Barrett taking his game to the next level this season so far, Ian?
Chris, you mentioned defense, and he says that's been his focus back to the preseason and training camp because he knows that he's going to be counted on to defend the opposing team's top wing night in and night out. So he added some muscle in the offseason. His conditioning is peak, and he's ready to take that challenge on both sides of the floor. And one of the interesting things to me is internally, Barrett was talked about as kind of Tom Thibodeau's Luol Deng. Obviously, Deng played such an important role with the Chicago Bulls when Thibodeau was coaching. So some internally have talked about Barrett as a similar kind of player. And obviously with Barrett, he's got so much room to grow. He's still so young, but what you saw against New Orleans was so promising because he was distributing the ball, he was rebounding the ball, and he was hitting shots in a way that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, and you saw that look in his eyes, the confidence level that he knew that when the Knicks needed a bucket, he was going to make it. And one of the interesting things about this team, Ian, with the new additions, Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, was how RJ's minutes, or not minutes, but how his game would be impacted. But so far, do you feel like they've been able to blend well together?
You know, early on, he wasn't getting a lot of shots. He wasn't shooting it well. But whether it's RJ Barrett, whether it's Julius Randle, Kemba Walker, or Evan Fournier, it doesn't have to be the same guy every night for this team. That's what we've seen so far, a balanced approach on offense. So it's not as if Kemba's taking 15 shots and Fournier's taking 12 shots and Randall's taking 20 shots, and that leaves nothing for RJ Barrett. It seems like they're playing off the hot hand night in and night out. So we haven't seen that decrease in usage that we kind of expected coming into this year for RJ Barrett.
This week's guest is Indiana Hoosiers head coach Mike Woodson, a former first-round draft pick by the franchise in 1980. Woodson was the head coach of the Knicks from 2012 to 2014 and is the only head coach over the last 2 decades to win a playoff series. Woodson returned as an assistant coach under Tom Thibodeau last season before taking the head coaching gig at his alma mater.
I thought his jump last year was a major jump when you look at players around the NBA. Johnny Bryant had a little bit to do with that, the work putting in with him. You know, he's a young player that I can't help but think that it's going to continue to grow. But his jump is going to be how far this team goes, you know, because he's playing big all-star minutes. You know, when you put up those kind of minutes, you know, you got to do things on the floor to help your ball club, you know, make the next step.
When you first started working with Tom, what did you learn about him? And I guess what did you know coming into it, and how did those two things align or not align?
You know, his team's always competed at a high level and played hard, especially on the defensive end. And once I got with Tom, he not really knowing me and me not knowing him on the personal level, he and I became pretty close, man. And just from a basketball standpoint, I think the guy's is brilliant. I mean, he's, you know, his intelligence for the game of basketball is off the chain, man, in terms of how he approaches the game, how he prepares for each game, how he prepares for practice. He's very organized. I like that because, you know, I kind of learned how to be organized through the guy by the name of Larry Brown, who put me in that arena in terms of being prepared and organizing your team to play basketball. And Tom is right at the top, man, when it comes to that.
And Coach, one of the reasons why the Knicks team last year was so much fun to watch is because Tibbs has his team playing every game like it's a playoff one. How difficult is that, though, to maintain over the course of 82 games and then transfer it in to the postseason?
Well, again, you know, if If you're talking about being a championship team, that should never enter the picture. You got to take it one game at a time, and mentally and physically, you got to push through. Tibbs always push teams to play at a high level, and the media sometimes take that out of content. Well, he pushes guys too hard. If you want to win titles, you got to do all the things that's necessary to win them. And, there's not a time limit on it. Tibbs' clock is ticking just like the players that are playing for him, man. So you got to do everything possible once you get in that position to try to win a title.
Time for a new segment where I look at a player or aspect of the Knicks that maybe is going a bit under the radar, and I give some roses in that direction. And Ian, I'm going to go with my man, Mitchell Robinson. He's a guy who probably wasn't expecting to see it this amount of minutes when Nerlens Noel was going to be healthy. But since Nerlens has been out, this guy has been a great rim protector. You saw what he's been able to do in the alley-oop, especially in that Pelicans game, just because he hasn't been able to get the blocks that you might have liked to see. He's been able to alter a lot of shots and be a great guy to get much needed baskets. Even though RJ Barrett's been great, even though you've seen Kemba Evan Fournier, Mitchell Robinson is a guy who's impressed me a lot more than I expected.
He's been very good, Chris. There's no doubt. And you look at him coming into this season, and he's not in shape yet. He's not in peak condition because he hadn't played in 7 months. So I'm interested to see what Mitchell looks like, in January as he gets games and practices under his belt. It's going to be interesting because the Knicks can offer Mitchell Robinson a contract extension at any point during the year. They chose not to do it in the preseason, but they can offer it any time. And if they don't, he hits free agency as an unrestricted free agent. You look at some of the deals out there, Robert Williams, Jonas Valanciunas, some of the centers that have signed deals recently, it may be setting the market for Mitchell Robinson.
And Mitch has been averaging 8.5 points per game, shooting 88% from the field, also averaging almost 9 rebounds per game. But is there an underrated stat, Ian, that really sticks out to you?
I'm looking at his foul rate, Chris, because the Knicks have talked a lot about how Mitchell Robinson has read the game better and he's become a more disciplined defender. His foul rate right now is more than 1 foul below per 36 minutes than his rookie rate. So that's encouraging. The other thing that Tom Thibodeau has mentioned, just because his block shots might be down doesn't mean that he's not doing a good job around the rim, because Thibodeau said he's not chasing blocks anymore. He's putting himself in better position. And for when someone chases blocks, it could put your defense in rotation or in bad spots. And he loves that Robinson is reading things around the rim much better these days.
Well, Kenny Payne and I made a trip to New Orleans to see him early on last summer. I walked away saying, man, this young man needs a lot of work, because he just didn't understand the dynamics of really playing hard. And you find that out in a lot of young players. It's no knock. They think they are playing hard, but there's always another level. As that summer went on, things started to register a little bit with him. And then once we got through camp and the season where he got in shape, he turned the corner big time, man. I mean, it was happening right in front of all of us. As well as, the Knick Nation. They started to see a little change. Then he got hurt. If he keeps working, boy, he's really going to be a major plus in this league, man. He's heading in the right direction, and then Tibbs are pushing him in the right direction. So he'll be good for this ball club this year.
Coached in the NBA for a long time, including in New York, had a great run with the Knicks. What's one of the big differences between what you were doing last year, the last 10 plus years, to this year in the college game?
It's been work in progress. I've assembled a wonderful staff that has helped me somewhat navigate through, and then just trying to build your team. I mean, it's a lot of work when you're talking about being a head coach at a big major university program. And I knew that coming in. Hell, I mean, it's no different than managing an NBA team. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of heads that you got to manage from the basketball side of it, on and off the court. And college is the same way, but you're just dealing with much younger players.
Coach, you were the last Knicks head coach to win a playoff series. So with that experience and knowing last year's team as well as you did, What are some lessons that the team, and specifically Julius Randle, could take from that Atlanta series to apply in the future?
Well, the beauty about this season and their team is they've added some pieces that can really help Julius, and it doesn't have to all be Julius. And I think Julius is sensing that now based on their early play. But when you get in the playoffs, you need talented pieces where you just can't zoom in on one guy. And I thought that happened to the Knicks somewhat last year when it came, down to them winning, a playoff series. This year will be different, I think, with the pieces that they've added. They can stay away from injuries. They'll make the next jump, I think.
Our thanks to Mike Woodson for joining us this week. For Chris, I'm Ian, and we'll see you next week for a live edition of the Putback.